guess you don't believe the Martians ought to let us kids run the world.
Salutations, my friends, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Factions of Freedom. I'm your host, Monsanto, Freedom Faction, whichever one you prefer, and I have titled this episode Unraveling Society, Genetic Tampering, and Collapsing Constructs, because we're going to be talking about all kinds of different things here. The paradoxical statement of America's starving obese, how scientists engineer food, approving drugs, genetically modified embryos, as well as the Pope's resignation being called. We have the church literally collapsing on itself, and we don't really know what to do. I don't think people know what to do. We always want to see things collapse and crumble, but what would we replace it with? We're going to be getting into this and more in this edition. But first, before we do, I hope you good people are checking out the links in the description bar below. Not only is that more information and access to everything else that we're doing, but also ways to support us. I really think people need to understand that with things going on, it's imperative for us to vote with our dollars, vote with our lifestyle, and to come up with an economy outside of the very one that's trying to keep us enslaved. You know what? I think that's it. I think that's probably a good place to start. So with that being said, let's go ahead and kick this show. Salutations, my friends. Salutations. Wow. Whoa. Instead of wow. I want to say whoa instead of wow. We got a lot of stuff lined up for you guys. That's for sure. You know, I'm going to say this and then I'll get into the intro and everything else. This is like a pre-intro, if that's a thing. Because I'm starting to interact with a lot more people within the community and starting to see a lot more different, a lot of different aspects to what all this entails. You know, more than just research. I'm very proud of what we're becoming. All I can ask is that you guys bear with me to do better. This is not a joke. Every single week, see, I'm between collecting the notes and then archiving information and then downloading things and really, doing this operation legit. It's kind of crazy to see the types of efforts and the types of people that we interact with and how that becomes the normal. But I think that's the point behind it. You got a lot of people within the community that use the idea of consciousness, and I've talked about this before, the whole being woke, stay woke thing. You got it to where it's trendiness, to where it's cool, it's casual. You don't have it for the right reasons, and I think that's one of the things I'm learning is it's not that I'm doing it for the fame, the glory, the right reasons or anything. I'm doing this out of necessity. I'm doing this because I want to too. There's no one telling me to do these things. I don't have to bust my hump, sit up over here and lose my mind every single week to try to find some clarity. But you know what? I do these types of things because I find kinship in places that I wouldn't believe. So with that being said, thank you guys and gals for tuning in to this edition of Factions of Freedom. Now, before I do, I got to give a quick shout out to New Leaf Naturals and Pure Heart Alchemy. I got a lot of cool stuff too that they sent our way. I have some of their New Leaf Naturals CBD for puppies. You guys know I got for pets. I have all kinds of different animals. I am an animal lover, and I also have the Pure Heart Alchemy sprays for the Oracle and the Sacred Sage. We have a few other things that we're going to be carrying, not only in the store and on the page and everything else, but I just wanted to give the introductory spray. Which one should we do? Oh, which one should we do? Let's do the Oracle. We got a lot of stuff to get over, and I need to stop playing around. But all right, let's get it popping. Like I said before, you guys can check the show notes, check all the links and stuff in the description bar below. I'll have all that. One of the untouched features that I really think I don't really speak a lot about that I should kind of start bringing back is the vault. Now, for people who don't know what that is, man, I'm slacking. Before we started trying to do the whole podcast thing, seeming cool and carrying on the way that we are now, like I said, it's always been more than just research, or that's what I'm learning now. I used to archive a lot of information, and now I'm going to have to start printing off some of this material. But basically, a few years ago, I started keeping an archive of information. I called it the Vault. There's all kinds of different PDFs, videos, documents, things that I've saved that you guys can go back there and look at. It's on our website. It's underneath the podcast tab. Once you're down there, you'll see the Pedogate timeline, the Paranormal Perspective, volumes 1 through 5 raw, as well as our occult criminal investigations reference. It's a Michigan State Police document from 1988 where they talk about all kinds of strange things. But whenever you get to the bottom, you'll see it load all kinds of different folders, all kinds of different files, all kinds of different documents that you yourselves can go download, like Agenda 2030, Aliens, Giants, Nephilim, DARPA projects, mind warfare, behavioral science, transhumanism, and genetic modification, 1990s NASA chemtrail, all kinds of study, all kinds of different stuff. CERN talk. Look, man, we've been doing this for a few years, so we have to have our own information. So make sure you guys go check that out on the website. And honestly, download our show notes. Okay, I'm really trying to make this a thing. That way, you guys can get the information outside of what I'm saying. You can go out and go look at these types of things as it's compiled and kind of see the picture that I'm trying to show for you guys. And with that being said, let's start the show. Really, let's start the show. So we kind of left off last week in consciousness wars, populations, reputation, and ideological interference, talking about censorship, MK Ultra documents, MIT wanting your thoughts, the New Mexico jihadi compound destroyed, the Baphomet statue, and so much more. What is going on in society? I think a lot of people don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out myself. But we had this Florida Madden tournament where obviously, again, we heard that the kid was on psychiatric drugs, SSRIs. David Spot Me Please Cats. Now, before I play for you guys this clip, in the mini-cast that I did with you guys earlier this week, I pointed out how this just reminded me of the episode from The Boondocks with the Xbox killer, where basically the loser just got angry and then went out and shot somebody. Now, that's my initial first reaction is just, this kid, he got upset that he lost. Well, you got to think, this is a tournament. This is a pre-planned event. There are body scanners at schools, libraries, everywhere. This kid's able to smuggle in a gun at a tournament. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this? So let's see if we can get this clip up for you guys, because, to me, that's just one of those red flags that I kind of think about. And like I said, this kind of set the tone for what I wanted to cover in this in this episode. Society unraveling. Why are we encouraging this? Why are we having kids that don't care about life, that don't care about their surroundings, that are completely disassociated, that are hopped up on these pharmaceuticals, who don't really care? I think that's a big thing that people need to understand, is that we are a very heavily desensitized generation. It may not feel like it, but we really are. So let me see if I can get this clip going for you guys. This is where we have CBS This Morning talking about the deadly mass shooting. Possibly. Well, while that's deciding to load, look at this kid. And I don't want to sound like a jerk, but what is it with the spaced out look, where you're zoning off into space, where life just doesn't, where it doesn't enter. You can see it, and it's kind of wild to me to think that these are the people that are being raised up in society. This is what kids aspire to be these days. Is
learning about the two people killed in yesterday's shooting at a video game competition in Jacksonville, Florida. Our CBS affiliate WJAX named them as 22-year-old Eli Clayton and 27-year-old Taylor Robertson. They were playing in that Madden NFL 19 event when another gamer who had lost returned with a gun and fired shots into the crowd. Police believe the gunman is 24-year-old David Katz. They say he wounded 9 others before killing himself. And Rob Borges is at the scene of the shooting where he spoke to a survivor. Good morning.
Good morning. When the shots first rang out at this Jacksonville mall, people initially thought it was firecrackers or balloons.
That's kind of crazy. Two people killing himself, and then, you know, wounding 9 others. This is. I'm not trying to, you know, make mountains out of molehills. You know, I'm just saying that this is just another one of those events that we need to look at. Okay, they're going to obviously try to politicize this, but I also think that's another example of us trying to desensitize death. We can't politicize these types of things. You know, these people require actual help. Like, they're losing their stuff. They're losing their mind mentally, and we're just encouraging it. You know, there's just so many mental and sometimes emotional aspects to look at this type of stuff that it just shows you where we're going as a society. If people only aspire to play video games and make money and make YouTube videos, to not do anything else, you know, to play games, is that not Rome? Bread and circus, to be distracted all the time. You see, I talked about that too in the broadcast I had earlier this week with you guys. You know, how they're trying to keep us in a state of arrested development, how they don't want us to advance, how they don't want us to understand what it means to step up and take the mantle, what it means to step up and be part of the change, part of the turning. Now, I could sit up over here and go into it all in depth. You know, oh, David Katz, he's, you know, I think his parents are part of the DOD and his mom's part of the FBI, you know, but the point I'm going to look at with it is this kid's crazy. You got a lot of people within the gaming industry that are nuts, man. The whole screaming and carrying on like that's not normal. The Tourette's, instilling Tourette's into yourself. I get it, getting upset about games, but you know, you got to look at, again, what the culture, what the industry is trying to push, what is acceptable. And this type of behavior, unfortunately, is becoming all too familiar. Now, to kind of shift gears, this is more monumental, if you ask me, more than anything. Again, looking at the environment, understanding society, where we're going. Apparently, not even apparently, we already knew this, but the death toll from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico raised from 64 people, that's right, get this, to 2,975. No, I didn't stutter. I said almost 3,000 people died during Puerto Rico. And you can tell because go back to, actually, unfortunately, you can't go back. Well, if you purchase some of our previous seasons, you can. But we have some of the clips and some of the videos of what was going on in Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria. You know, you have water level that's literally come up to multiple floors in apartment buildings. You have cars flowing down the street like it's crazy. So of course, nearly 3,000 people would die. But what does this mean? Does this mean that CNN, ABC, CNBC, does this mean that they're all still fake news for not informing us of this type of information? You see, I had to rely on people that had boots on the ground. We had to rely on people that were actually there. Find other accounts and find other people that could translate for us to where we could see what was happening. Find articles and things like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I think Billy Carson was one of the individuals trying to get supplies to Puerto Ricans. It was somebody during hurricane season. But my point is this: for this type of revelation to come out after the fact, it shows that they tried to suppress it. And the governor, Ricardo Rossello, oh man, like he's corrupt. So yeah, I want to point that out. Again, it shows the state of affairs with everything that's going on. Now, one of the other things that kind of pertains to, I guess, international affairs or paying attention to what's actually happening, the people of Venezuela are going through something crazy. What is happening with Venezuela is kind of, I would say, a crime against humanity, if you want my personal opinion. Let me see if I can get this clip up for you guys, because it's kind of down here. But grid failure. Without electricity, Venezuelans are eating spoiled meat. So while you have nearly 3,000 people in Puerto Rico dying, Venezuelans who have finished, eating the animals in the zoo, eating pets, scrounging for any kind of any kind of food. They are now eating spoiled meat. I remember reporting on this like a few years ago, and that's what's crazy is while I'm not, speaking every day about what's happening to Venezuela, France, and everywhere else, because, we do still pay attention to geopolitics, it's crazy seeing the state of affairs, seeing things turn. I remember a few years ago reporting on what was going on with Venezuela, to where they had this campaign called Fingerprints for Food. Things became so scarce there that in order for people to get food, they had to register their biometrics. Now that's passed. That was a few years ago. Now we're here that they're eating spoiled meat. What do you think this is going to do to their into their intestines, to their body, to their biochemistry? You see. What do you think this is going to do to their death toll? How come we're not being informed about this? And I think what's even more wild is you hear talks of an invasion taking place in Venezuela. So what I'm trying to illustrate to you here by just going over these few articles, SSRI, this David Spot Me Please kid losing his mind, Puerto Rico's death toll being a lot more than it's reported. And you can actually go back. We talked about how there was geoengineering and weather modification involved with that as well. I call it post-weather modification, post-geoengineering, because now they're going to come through and offer a sustainable society. You see, Elon Musk came immediately right after just to install his power walls. But what am I trying to illustrate to you is how this cycle of collapse, of organized chaos, how they have a solution for it. And how it's almost paradoxical in nature trying to understand it. And I think one thing, I'm going to read this quick article for you. I think this encapsulates it. It says, America's crisis, starving obese people. I think this is probably the most paradoxical thing that explains what is happening in our country. We have obese people that are starving and skinny people who are full. But then when you talk to them about alternative diets and alternative ways of living, they would just love to go to McDonald's. And what do I mean by this? How does this pertain to this Florida shooter? This is what the system churns out. That's the whole reason why we're here. That's the whole reason as to why alternative viewpoints are important. This is what the system churns out. Zombies taking pills, going to McDonald's, going about their lives dead inside. That's what this system churns out. So when we say wake up, it's more than that. This is why, I use the phrase consciousness wars in the previous episode. You've got to understand the sophisticated brainwashing and the sophisticated mind control and social engineering that's taking place. So I'm going to read for you this quick article. And we've talked about this, as well, the Tavistock Institute, and how this is all part of, again, more of an organized agenda. I have an article later on, right after this, about how scientists are engineering the food. I've talked about this before. You can go look at thousands of documentaries about how disgusting McDonald's is, and you will discover that the very chemicals that they're putting in food are designed to become addictive, are designed to create a chemical response inside you, to where a chemical biological response to where you feel like you are craving. That's what it is. They're giving you cravings of their food. But let me get into this article. I put this up August 27th. It's from the Daily Sheeple. It says, America's crisis, starving obese people. While Americans' waistlines continue to expand, those who are gaining the most weight are also starving. They aren't starving of calories, but of vital nutrients that help keep the body working in tip-top condition. And this, before I continue on, I think this is important because while I'm trying to get myself back into shape, I'm learning that, it's also about patterns, habits, how you're able to take care of yourself and how you're able to replace these patterns with healthy substitutes. And like this article just said, the food that a lot of people are eating these days doesn't have the proper nutrients and the vitamins that people need to sustain themselves. So continuing on, it says, everyone knows that vegetables are packed full of nutrients and vitamins that are good for the body. Yet most Americans don't meet their daily dose of vegetables in a week. Only 14% of adults have only 14% of adults even consume 3 servings of veggies per day. But the news is worse. Adolescents eat even fewer vegetables than their adult counterparts. So as Americans are getting bigger and consume more calories, they are wholly malnourished at the same time. According to a well-worded article by Personal Liberty, all foods have calories, but only a very small amount of foods have nutrition. And that's what it is. Diet, health, nutrition. I'm trying to be here for a while. Fighting this censorship, that's nothing new. I'm trying to be here for a while, have my mind in tip-top shape so that you guys can understand what's going on. But continuing on, it says, unfortunately, this ignorance is capitalized upon by commercial, quote, food processors who produce millions of tons of empty foods that have calories without any actual nutrition. The problem then quickly becomes worse. A full belly doesn't know the difference between just calories and actual nutrition. That's for the brain to figure out, yet most won't take the time they need to look into what it is they're actually consuming. Even though the results and outer manifestations of malnutrition is sickness, nobody equates the two. Neither the patients nor their doctors seem to realize that a whole whopping of 85% of Americans are nutrient deficient, meaning they lack essential vitamins and minerals. This ignorance has caused a health crisis upon which commercial food processors and the medical establishment have raked in trillions of dollars. It has also led a national obesity epidemic, yet the obese people are, ironically, the ones who are starving. According to The Guardian, this problem is called the hidden hunger, and it robs billions of people the opportunity to reach their full potential. The hidden hunger. They have a term for it, the hidden hunger. Huh. Think about that. It's the obese people that are starving. They have the hidden hunger. They don't know what's wrong, so they continue to consume this nutrient deprived, air quotes, food. This is what I keep going on and on about genetically modified food, the chemtrails, the things that they're spraying. It doesn't make sense. It does if you look at it from this point of view, you know. Since we're over here talking about how this air quotes food is disgusting, let's take a quick trip over here to McDonald's.
This morning, a parasite outbreak linked to McDonald's salads is growing. The CDC says more than 500 people in 16.
Disgusting. Atrocious. 500 people now sick in parasite outbreak linked to McDonald's salads. What's crazy is we've been following this story for a while now. It's like week after week.
States have become sick. Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey are not among those states. 24 people have gone to the hospital. The FDA says some salads bought at McDonald's are likely the cause of the infections. Last month, McDonald's said it had to pull the salad mix suspected of.
That is hilarious, and that's hilarious. I mean, I don't think I'm not laughing at people getting sick. I think it's just McDonald's. You know, they're trying to make a vegan burger, a McVegan. And look at this. That's what I'm saying, is we keep reporting on this. It keeps happening. You know, more of these salads keep messing people up. Are people not paying attention? No, why are you even going to McDonald's? You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense. But it's because they engineer the food. It's because they're studying psychology, science. They're understanding how people work. You see, that's what I mean by the technocrats, the social engineers, the people in the background that understand these types of things, that play and profiteer off of habits, off of humanity. Again, this is what I mean just by that, by these shady people doing shady things. Check this out right here. How scientists engineer food to make them dangerously addictive. Renegade Tribune. And I know a lot of people know this, but why am I trying to talk about this? Why are we looking at food? I'm trying to feed your mind right now. Whatever you do outside of this dictates whether or not the message gets clearer, to whether it gets through, to whether you actuate it. whatever you're feeding, and this is what we talked about with Jesse, a vegan takeover on our one of our most recent Fellowship and Freedom episodes, how your food has to be your medicine. And I'm not going to be up over here virtue signaling. I tell you guys all the time, I'm not perfect. I'm trying to figure it out myself. But I'm trying to say how these foods can keep you in a state of subservience to where you become I suppose addicted, to where you become the perfect pawn, the useful idiot, the consumer, you see, of these chemicals, of these things that aren't even food. But let me get into this. This is by the Renegade Tribute team. It says, it's no secret that the standard American diet is having a terrible effect on human health. What is a secret, though? It's how the food industry uses science and psychology to create processed food products that are devoid of nutrition, full of chemical additives and colorings, and incredibly addictive. In fact, the science of how food companies get customers physically, mentally, and emotionally hooked on their products reads like a good conspiracy theory. Major food manufacturers know good and well that repeat customers can be made by tricking their mind and body and overriding our natural tendency to seek out healthy, satisfying foods. The public and the food companies have known for decades now, or at the very least since this meeting, that sugary, salty, fatty foods are not good for us in the quantities that we consume them. So why are the diabetes and obesity and hypertension numbers still spiraling out of control? It's not just a matter of poor willpower on the part of the consumer and a give the people what they want attitude on the part of the food manufacturers. What I found out over years of research and reporting was a conscious effort taking place in labs and marketing meetings and grocery store aisles to get people hooked on foods that are convenient and inexpensive. This is said by Michael Ross. The story revolves around physiology, psychology, and neuroscience and three key ingredients: salt, sugar, and fat. And at the core of addictive food science is our understanding of physiology and neurochemical responses to foods. Scientists have been able to boil this down to a simple equation, the food pleasure equation. As they call it, the hidden hunger. You see, this is something very real. And it starts with just that, with how you just change your mind, change your biochemistry, your neurochemistry. You see, one of the mini casts that I'm working on, where we go over mental health, I talk about, again, how at the University of Zurich, your thoughts can literally change the structure of your brain. And as Michael Moss said, yes, they're able to understand the psychology of addiction and being able to reward it, you see. The food pleasure equation postulates that the brain has the ability to quantify the pleasure contained in an eating experience as performed by certain dopamine neurons in the brain and the sensing of calories by the gut. When you have a food choice, the brain actually calculates how much pleasure will be generated during the eating and the digestion of a particular food. Now, what I'm trying to get at by looking at this is, it's again, we're looking at your biochemistry. If they can insert all kinds of different chemicals, get you addicted to these chemicals with your food, you're not operating at your full potential. If you play into these things, you willingly become genetically modified, and this plays a heavy part in what we're going to be talking about within the next section. But we have to understand how right now it's kind of like a voluntary yet forced upon, because these are our only air quotes options, a voluntary or compulsory agenda. You see, I think people really should, and we'll get into this later, you know, how there's a new study on how air pollution affects intelligence, and a new study on genetically modified embryos. All of this stuff is important. And how it starts is, again, with the food, with the mind, with the culture, with the society, what's acceptable. And speaking of what's acceptable, apparently a lot of people were excited by this, and I'm excited more or less to speak on the matter. But the FDA just approved PayPal founders, Peter Thiel, his project to use magic mushrooms to treat depression. And what I mean, and how this ties into, you know, what's socially acceptable, how we're operating these days, what we're consuming, is this isn't the first time that I've addressed this story or followed this story, so to speak, or this trail. I actually talk about it a lot. Drugs. what happens whenever you have Google offering you weed? Don't worry, Monsanto and Microsoft are already working on it. What happens whenever you have any one of these big tech companies or any of the people that you see meeting today, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, what have you? You see, all these people meeting and then at the same time coming up with drugs. You know, there's a very popular drug in Silicon Valley these days, ayahuasca. You got people working with computers doing ayahuasca, doing these types of introspective drugs because they're disassociated from reality to a degree, and they know it. But they need to have these types of things to understand the oneness, to understand everything that we're basically talking about now. They're playing around with powers that they can't comprehend. They're playing God, and they're not necessarily sure what they're creating. Right here, Sons of Liberty Media by John Vives. This is actually a article by the good guys, the good team over there at the Free Thought Project, but the Sons of Liberty Media reposted it. I put this up August 27th. It says a startup backed by billionaire Peter Thiel has received FDA approval to run clinical trials to treat depression with magic mushrooms. Now, I think this is it's good. It is controversial. You know, you have people who suffer from PTSD who are using MDMA to restore the serotonin, to basically feel happy again. You know, drug therapy, regulated drug therapy, I think it is interesting. Nonetheless, what I think it becomes is it's not that it creates addicts, it creates curiosity. And I just don't think that we should have these types of organizations kind of doling this type of stuff out to us. You know, this is, again, why we pay attention to what Monsanto and Bayer are doing, because these are companies that seem as if they're trying to get into the healthcare field. Now, this is something we talked about a few weeks ago, how Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft all pledged to fix healthcare. Okay? But at the same time, we heard that the phones, yes, the phones, that they're all creating apps and their own versions of the phones. They emit a blue light that is blinding us. The artificial light is causing macular degeneration. So you see how they provide a problem, but also an alternative form of solution. What is the point behind offering these types of drugs? Monsanto getting involved with marijuana, PayPal, Peter Thiel being involved with magic mushrooms. It's the idea of disassociation. As I said before, desensitizing us. More of this escapism. You see, let me get into this article here. It says that this week, as it was announced, a startup called Compass Pathways has received approval from the Food and Drug Administration to develop treatments for depression and possibly even pharmaceuticals with psilocybin, the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms. Compass Pathways launched in the UK in 2016 thanks to funding from Peter Thiel. While the company is just now receiving approval to run trials in the USA, they were already approved in Canada and the Netherlands, and their base of operations in the UK. According to the company's website, the trials will take place across 15 different sites throughout Europe and North America, and will involve 216 participants. The tests are expected to begin in the UK by the end of August, so right about this time frame, they're starting, crazy how time works like that, they're starting trials right about now. Quote, this summer, we are beginning a randomized control trial of psilocybin therapy for treatment-resistant depression. This will be the largest clinical study of its kind and will take place in a number of clinical trials at sites across Europe. The trial is a phase 2B dose ranging study with 216 patients. If successful, it will be followed by a phase 3 studies in which we will look at comparing the optimal dose, most likely to placebo or standard of care. A statement from the company said. George Goldsmith, chairman and co-founder of the Compass Pathways, told Fox Business that these trials will help the team learn exactly how they can use psilocybin to treat depression. Quote, depression is the leading cause of ill health and disability worldwide, and treatment-resistant depression affects more than 100 million people. It is a huge unmet need, and the trial will teach us more about how this new approach might address it, Goldsmith said. This trial or these trials will undoubtedly add to the wave of psychedelic studies that are being carried out by a growing number of brave researchers. Brave researchers, psychonauts, people taking trips down the rabbit hole, down their own mind, opening up the third eye, as provided by PayPal. We have a lot of different things to go over, but I wanted to start the show going over just that. We're going to come back in the next segment and talk about this new study, how they're having air pollution and how it affects your intelligence. But I wanted to start off the show talking about, drugs, environmental things, and the environment. What is going on? What is socially acceptable, and how they're trying to basically prepare us to accept a world of immorality, a world where everything has no purpose. You see, things are going to get real vague. Things are going to get real vague. But all I can really say is strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about this and more. All the other transhuman aspects, like I said, this eugenics program that we see taking place, the biohacking, and more on the other side. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. So, you know, I'm looking at things, and it's like you have an archbishop over here literally fleeing from the country because he can't, you know, he's probably being threatened, receiving threats for exposing the pedophilia that's taking place within the Catholic Church. You have tech giants, and this is something that I kind of wanted to get on or talk about in the previous episode. You have tech giants meeting up, talking about how they're going to save the election. This is what I mean by the digital mafia. You have all kinds of different things going on, and people are bored. We live in such a momentous time that it blows my mind, and like I said, I feel sometimes unable and unworthy of being able to, you know, catch this, to be able to like compile it all, to talk about it all. It's crazy. You know, what I wanted to end out with in the previous segment, you know, is maybe some help could have been given to that David Katz kid if he was given magic mushrooms. Maybe that kid would have an understanding of compassion, community, and so much more if he interacted with people, if somebody just reached out, if somebody just said, hey. In this world that we're living in, the time frame that we find ourselves in, I understand that it's hard to connect with people, but you have to. We're humans. There's deeper things going on. We share the same space. We share the same air. We all have lungs, I would hope. I'd hope you're, you know, not a mer person. And I would hope that you're able to understand that there is so much to you and to me and to everyone else out there that you would just reach out. And, you know, you don't need mushrooms to tell you that. But like I said, let's kind of get into what we're gonna get into. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to this segment of Factions of Freedom. I am your introspective and sometimes very extroverted host, Noiser, Freedom Faction, whichever one you prefer. And we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy things, as always: transhumanism, genetic modification, biohacking. And now there's a new study, and I think this is important that we talk about these things, a new study that claims air pollution is making us less intelligent. This is important because what are chemtrails, and how does this pertain to the first segment? Again, what's being sprayed on our food? Do you wash your vegetables? Do you wash your fruits? Do you wash your meat? So if air pollution is making us less intelligent, what are we consuming? There's a cycle, you see. I think, and this is something that we'll get into here shortly, I think they said that it's raining Roundup in Argentina, and the damage that is causing is crazy. And here we are again talking about the epigenetics, how people are affected, how what we see taking place is what I would again consider a crime against humanity. The epigenetic assault, the generational damage that people are facing. According to a new study, high amounts of pollution in the air is dumbing down the world's population. The new research indicates that the damage to a society of toxic air is far deeper than the well-known impacts on physical health, and it appears to be a precursor to a ban on certain vehicles. This was put up August 28th by Max Slavo of SHTF Plan, and what we're getting into, because all this stuff also pertains to Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. We got to clean things up, right? We have to live in harmony with the planet. We have to stop our detrimental ways and things that we're doing. This is why everybody's trying to get psychedelic. This is why everybody's trying to get close and hippie. But you got a lot of fake hippies out there. You got a lot of people that'll complain about global warming, but will leave every light on in the house. I digress. This particular study's research was conducted in China because their air quality is horrendous. It's about 3 times above the World Health Organization's guidelines, according to a report on this study done by The Guardian. But the findings are relevant across the world because about 95% of the global population is breathing what scientists have said is, quote, unsafe air. This study went in depth and found that the high population levels led to significant drops in test scores in language and arithmetic, with the average impact equivalent to having lost a year of the person's education, and the effect is much worse on some of the most vulnerable people in society, the elderly, Quote, polluted air can cause everyone to reduce their level of education by 1 year, which is huge, said Ji Chen at the Yale School of Public Health in the United States. Chen is also a member of the research team. Quote, but we know the effect is worse for the elderly, especially those over 64, and for men, and for those with low education. If we calculate the loss for those, it may be a few years of education. The Guardian reported on the previous research that has discovered that the air pollution harms cognitive performance in students. But this is the first study that has examined people of all ages and different effects between men and women. Now I'm going to stop right there real quick and put a pause in it, because I think that this is monumental. I hope that other people kind of get into this and we start understanding more about this. But what we're beginning to see is again, this eugenics program, this agenda for population control, for dehumanization, to where, because we see these things going on, we see how they're assaulting us, they're having all these different problems pop up. This is how we navigate them. The problems are the solutions. Unfortunately, this is why we've become accustomed to seeing people in China wear those face masks. This is why air pollution is a very real thing. This is why, greenhouse gases, chemtrails, all these things are very important. What we're putting off in the sky eventually has to come down over our crops, and we eventually have to ingest them. But if you're losing an entire year's worth of education, an entire year of going to school from just, and they didn't give a duration. That's the crazy thing. They don't know if it's over a lifetime or if it's like every year you're losing a year of your education, but that's crazy. These types of studies need to take place because people who are living in these massive population centers are effectively being dumbed down. We're not talking about the 5G telecom system. We're not talking about the Gwyn towers, the cell phone towers, and everything else like that. We're not talking about the lead in the water, the atrazine in the water, the fluoride in the water. No, we're literally now talking about the air and how it's literally affecting your cognitive ability. Let me get back into this article. It says that the damage done in human intelligence was worst for those over 64 years old with serious consequences, said Chen. We usually don't make the most critical financial decisions in old age. We usually make the most critical financial decisions in old age, Chen added. Rebecca Daniels from the UK public health charity MedAct said, quote, this report's findings are extremely worrying. A recent study found toxic air was linked to extremely high mortality in people with mental disorders, and earlier work linked it to increased mental illness in children, while another analysis found those living near busy roads had an increased risk of dementia. That's crazy. That is crazy. So you're having increased risk of dementia, mental illness, cognitive behavioral or cognitive function, depreciation. It's crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy, and this is just now being conducted. That's probably why people who have a certain level of peace and resolve live out in the country. But this is why we need to look at all the other things that are going on. I'm going to pull up a clip for you guys. This is a trailer of a movie called Genetically Modified Children. And the reason I want to play this clip is because it means so much. It's groundbreaking to me, because we actually see, again, more studies taking place in the epigenetic factors of life and our surroundings, what the damage that Monsanto and Bayer are really doing. But let me get this clip up for you guys. And I'll try to narrate it for some people. March 2015, the World Health Organization classified glyphosate as a carcinogenic. Glyphosate is the main component.
Dos abogados, 3 o 4 médicos, se venía un montón de gente, dice que eran de hacia Estados Unidos,
they said they were from the United States of America. They didn't want to talk to us.
Hoy no dan más veneno, ¿no?
Today,
y esto daban a nosotros para nosotros ponerlo en tabaco.
But they would give it to them.
poisoned by agrochemicals that were spread over the land for 20 years.
And that's where it starts.
Leucemia,
Leukemia.
16 casos.
16 cases. Since I carry that genetic damage, transmitting it then goes off to the offspring. There's a modification of the genetic heritage.
Monsanto and sold this stuff anyway, and of course made a great deal of money.
Está trabajando con algo peligroso.
With something dangerous.
Iba a un arroyo y del arroyo sacan agua para tomar.
And then we get water from the creek.
El gobierno sí dice, está bien, nosotros le vamos a dar agua a ustedes, pero ustedes tienen que firmar acá donde renuncian a hacernos juicio.
Where this waiver is saying we're not responsible. How do you explain to a 3-year-old baby that you're going to die? It's a poison that you have in your body. Crazy. Yeah, definitely make sure you guys go check that out. You know, I'm not one to try to, like I said, you know, virtue signal and talk about this type of stuff in a kind of crazy way. But you have to look at what we're up against. What is happening? This is forced genetic modification. These are horrific deformities caused by agrochemicals that are being sprayed everywhere in the majority of America. People don't understand what this means. But again, they're causing damage so that they can come through with the solution. And I'm going to leave this clip playing for you guys, this trailer playing for you guys for a bit. But I'm going to read this article that talks about this new study and how it's the most successful attempt to gene edit human embryos so far. You know, this is put up August 28th by Singularity Hub. It's written by Shelley Fan. And what I'm trying to do by illustrating this is how they understand that at a certain level, what's happening to the human populace is our genetics are being broken down. They are breaking us down. Our DNA is under assault. This is why I talk about what's happening with the children, what's happening with us, the bioaccumulation, how all of this different types of stuff affects us, and how it's going to affect not only you, but your children and your children's children. They may not show up right now, but this is very, very important. So their response is to come through and have some kind of fertilization association that basically approves births. This is what I mean by eugenics. You see. But let me get into this. It talks about in the quest for CRISPR supremacy, China just won another first. Last week, a team used CRISPR-Cas9, and for people who don't know, that's basically they describe it as using it for like Legos for your DNA, but they used CRISPR-Cas9 to correct a single mistaken DNA letter in over a dozen human embryos and succeeded 16 out of 18 tries, a massive improvement over previous attempts. The high success rate is, in part, thanks to a relatively new CRISPR method called base editing. If standard CRISPR is a pair of scissors, then base editing is a surgical knife. Introduced in 2016, the technology precisely swaps out a mistaken DNA letter for the correct variant, for example, C for a T or G for an A, which in turn corrects a genetic disease. Cool, right? There's more. The edited embryos were created through IVF using standard techniques. Other than carrying a mutation, which would eventually lead to a rare disease that tears apart the body's connective tissues, the embryos were otherwise healthy. If given the chance, they could potentially develop into fully fledged humans. This is notably different than many previous attempts at embryo editing, which often use discarded or mutated embryos created by one egg or two sperms, embryos with no chance of ever becoming human. The reason is ethics. Editing genes in mature cells in the body is limited to the single patient. In contrast, because embryos carry all genomic instructions, including making new eggs or sperm, any changes to their DNA will also affect their offspring. Editing embryos is essentially forcing genetic changes onto future generations that have no say in whether or not they want to accept that risk. Back in 2015, a Chinese team first reported using CRISPR on human embryos in an obscure journal. a media firestorm subsequently ensured. Although the experiments were conducted on discarded embryos with an extra pair of chromosomes, experts were widely divided in an opinion where the study was ethical, with some calling it irresponsible. We're in the day and age of talking about genetically modified children, super soldiers, designer babies. We are literally talking about designer babies. A few weeks ago, the University of Oxford warned about the black market of human cloning. I don't think people get what that means. The very fact that we're kind of, again, desensitized to the fact that these things are coming out, these revelations of society, of technology, of medicine, what this does mean for us, for humanity, we don't really care. For life, we don't really see how we're being affected. We don't care. That's the simplest way to say it. We don't care. Again, that's why I led in talking about David Katz. His disassociation is more common than you think. And if we're over here able to create life, modify life, then the life that you have right now should mean nothing, right? This is our approach. This is how people perceive these types of things. They don't see the subtle manipulation of why caring is important, of why understanding what it means to be human is so essential to our growth. But don't worry. Like I said, the University of Oxford is warning of the black market of human cloning for organ harvesting. We put this up August 22nd or August 23rd. It's by Skywatch TV. A black market is any illegal service or commodity that is high in demand that eventually makes its way to an unreported economy. Dr. Charles Foster of the University of Oxford believes this will happen with human cloning. Quote, "I expect that there will be a black market around therapeutic cloning," said Dr. Foster in a recent interview. Quote, "The appropriate caution of the regulators when faced with potentially new uses of therapeutic cloning is likely to be seen by desperate patients and relatives as inappropriately restrictive. Human cloning is illegal in nearly every country, but the Human Fertilization and Embryology Act of 2018 makes studying the topic legal in the UK. Therapeutic cloning, technically called somatic cell nuclear transfer, SCNT, is a possibility by which a cell nucleus containing genetic material is removed from a living being and transferred into an unfertilized egg that also had its nucleus removed. Human cloning technology would reinvent the process of transplanting organs. In a theory, a patient receiving an organ removed from his or her clone would have a successful operation with no risk of rejection." In 2013, BBC reported that scientists in the U.S. were already experimenting with cloned human embryos as a source of stem cells. These cells could, in theory, be used to create organs, bones, and tissue for use in surgery. Now, I'm going to stop right there because they're telling you that they're doing everything else other than creating clones, other than creating people. Again, we're talking about the University of Oxford here. China's debating their one-child policy. I wonder if we have that clip ready for you guys, because this is, again, important. The one-child policy. While we're here talking about this type of stuff, I think it's important to look at that. The one-child policy. Scott Wilson, the Pennsylvania Democratic congressional candidate, talking about irresponsible breeders, what life is becoming. What we're seeing is a condemning and a demoralization, as well as, like I said, a dehumanization, to where we don't necessarily think about our life. You see, we want authority to dictate what is better for us. You see, what happens whenever having a child becomes a privilege? I mean, that's what they're trying to do in China. They're trying to have it to where, you have to have more than 2 kids because they realize that their one-child policy screwed their demographics. You see. So instead of playing for you guys that clip where we're with the one-child policy, you can go back and go listen to that on our previous episode. I'm going to play for you guys instead how they have these exoskeletal suits that augment soldiers. That's right. So while we're talking about them creating an all-new version of man, an all-new version of humanity, right? They're going a step farther. This is what I mean by the transhumanism. They have to introduce it first as, an exoskeletal suit, something that you put on. Like Batman, Yeah. Sure. Yeah, kind of like Batman. Yeah, whatever. They want to introduce it first like that. The technology can enhance you. That right now you are a flawed being. That through science and technology, that we can augment you and be better. Let's see if we can get this clip up for you guys. Russian military lab unveils prototype of Star Wars-like combat suit. The stunning gear will be worn by Russian soldiers on the future of battlefields. And it's got all kinds of different, what I would assume are muscle augmentators. It also includes powered exosuit to help increase performing and stamina while fighting. Probably all kinds of different cool little tricks and things there. But they're basically just doing a showcase of it, you know. And this is something that we had up on we had this up last year. We've actually talked about this before. But again, they're trying to introduce it. I think it's called Atlas. They have their own version of it. But basically, this is augmenting soldiers. We're trying to make them into the super soldiers. These people who have incredible strength. You know, what happens whenever they start having genetic modification? Soldiers who are literally, I don't want to say roided out, you know, on steroids or something like that, but to where they literally have the power of 5 men, to where they've somehow figured out a way to augment their muscles. Who's to say that they're not already, you know, breeding these types of super soldiers? We've talked about this too, you know, how I forget the Syrian ambassador's name, but he also talked about how they have genetically modified Syrian opposition, genetically modified Syrian rebels. This is something that's been going on, or that is going on within the higher upper echelons of society and within what is now called the deep state, the shadow government, you see. And it starts with everything that we talked about in the previous sections, you see. I think people have to understand that while this seems fantastical, a lot of this stuff was prophesied. A lot of this stuff was expected to happen. And when we come back from our break, we're going to be talking about that, how religion, spirituality, and everything else that we see kind of taking place, how it again is also going through this turning, this change, this mixture. You see, this is the kind of question that I asked you guys in our Instagram story or over our questionnaire. You know, a lot of people had some great responses. But what will we replace when the church collapses? You see, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about that. China calling for censorship of religion and rumors, people calling for the Pope's resignation, as well as so many other things and more. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. I hope we don't go anywhere. Shoot. We'll be right back. You know, the crazy thing is I'm learning that people want to support us. There's actually, we've actually got a lot of great responses from people over the CBD oil and the Pure Heart Alchemy, and our guests, man. You know, people actually reach out to them too. It's pretty cool. I really do appreciate doing this, being here with you guys, kind of going over this type of stuff. I know it kind of seems wild, but you know what else is there for our generation, and what else is there for our people to do? We are in a fight for for more than people can believe, and you know, it's causing people to step up. You either have people that are turning off or stepping down or stepping up, and that's a beautiful thing to me. So again, thank you for tuning in to the third segment, the final segment of this edition. I am your contemplative host, Noise Era, Freedom Faction, whichever one you prefer. And I told you we're going to be talking about religion, spirituality, some of the deeper aspects of what is guiding humanity. How have we gotten here? What is going on? Where do we go from here? In the technological age, in the information age, is there a need for spiritualism? Is there a need for spirituality, for religion, for any kind of governing system within oneself to be the moral compass, to be the driving force? You see. Now, we can look at, you know, what's going on with the church, the Pedogate revelations. That is definitely real, and something we'll get into here shortly. But I think people need to understand what comes after, or at least ask themselves what comes after. A lot of people don't pray. A lot of people don't meditate. And I'm not saying, you know, pray. I'm not saying, you know, to what is commercialized as religion. I'm saying a lot of people don't look within self, within God, within a lot of different things. This is what I meant to try to talk about in our previous episode, the ideological interference. You see, while they have the Baphomet statue being raised up as they're toppling the Silent Sam. So you have to ask yourself, what is actually going on in so many different ways? So as I said, to kind of get the ball rolling on things, and this is, again, something I wanted to touch on in the previous episode, because it's big news and we need to understand what it means. But apparently, and I touched on it briefly at the start of the show, apparently social media technocrats are meeting in secret to plot election strategies. And so what this means and how this ties into belief, because this is something you really see me asking. Who is guiding us? Where are your thoughts coming from? Are they being manipulated? Are your thoughts your own? There was a study conducted just the other week about how robots are able to brainwash children into mindless conformity. You know, do this, do that. Who? If those are children with robots, something we can see. And if anything, I'll pull up this clip for you guys about how they're using robots now to teach children. If they're doing this now with children, you can see this. Who's to say that we are not being engineered? Who's to say that we are not being manufactured to a point of passivity? Let me get into this. I put this up August 24th. It's by an alternate author of Technocracy News. It says technocrats do very little in public because they have little regard for political process or politicians. This is likely not the first such meeting, or what kind of first such secret meeting, as evidenced by the apparent collusion to censor certain alternative media at the same time. Representatives from a host of the biggest U.S. tech companies, including Facebook and Twitter, have scheduled a private meeting for Friday to share their tactics and preparation for the 2018 midterms elections. Last week, Facebook's head of security policy, Nathaniel Gleicher, invited employees from a dozen companies, including Google, Microsoft, Snapchat, Twitter, to gather at Twitter's headquarters in downtown San Francisco, according to an email obtained by BuzzFeed News. Quote, as I've mentioned to several of you over the last few weeks, we have been looking to schedule a follow-on discussion to our industry conversation about the information operations, election protection, and the work we are all doing to tackle these challenges, Gleicher wrote. The meeting, the Facebook official wrote, will have a three-part agenda. Each company will present the work that they've been doing to counter information operations There will be a discussion period for problems each company faces and a talk about whether such a meeting should become a regular occurrence. Now, before I continue on there, what we're talking about is the digital mafia. These are the technocrats. These are the people behind the scenes, your invisible accusers that you can't see. These are the people deciding the fate and the mindset of thousands and millions of people. This is one representation of the elites. Now, for for people that listen who haven't caught on, about the Illuminati, they're very real. And what we have right now, and this is something I've talked about time and time again, putting a capstone on our awakening using technology, because we're going through a massive period of change. They're trying to only let us operate within 140 characters. What they're doing is they're governing our thoughts. They're manipulating us. You see, your vote, you can vote right now. Throw out your phone. Throw out your old food. Throw out your old lifestyle. Throw out your laptop. Throw out your computer. Throw out everything. But what is happening right now is just that. The injection of a whole new superclass that reigns over society. These are the technocrats. I'm sure I'm on some kind of list somewhere. I'm sure I am. I'm going to say this and then we'll jump back into this. I think it's kind of crazy, everything that we're talking about today. I definitely did not expect to talk about it, coming into this talking about Jade Helm 15 and the Ferguson riots, as well as other paranormal things. What we are going through today is crazy. And because it's happening in such a rapid fashion that a lot of people don't understand, they don't see how they're being pulled from one direction to another direction, to another direction, to another direction, to another direction, to another distraction. You see, all of these things play an important role, and whether or not you choose to engage, they count on that. The same way when you turn off your location on Google, you're still counted as a factor somewhere. But let me get back into this article. It says, in May, 9 of those companies met at Facebook to discuss similar problems, alongside 2 U.S. government representatives, the Department of Homeland Security Under Secretary Chris Keebs and Mike Burham from the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, created in November. Attendees left the meeting discouraged that they received little information from the government. Tech companies, Facebook and Twitter in particular, have faced intense scrutiny for how slowly they initially reacted to the reports that foreign intelligence and affiliated operations used their platforms to manipulate users ahead of the 2016 election, leading to the drops in user confidence and a threat of regulation from lawmakers. And that's basically about it. But I'm going to go up here and get this other article, where we have Donald. I put the clip of Donald Trump in basically just to kind of show his response to the matter, to censorship. The argument that's being made for this guy now is he just Googled his name and he realized, hey, there's only bad stuff coming out, and so I'm being censored. It's like, good Lord, good Lord, our fate is in the hands of somebody that is extraordinarily special. Wow. So I'm not even going to go into depth about that, but let's take a listen to his thoughts regarding the censorship.
I think Google is really taking advantage of a lot of people, and I think that's a very serious thing, and it's a very serious charge. I think what Google and what others are doing, if you look at what's going on at Twitter, if you look at what's going on in Facebook, they better be careful, because you can't do that to people. You can't do it. We have literally thousands and thousands of complaints coming in, and you just can't do that. So I think that Google and Twitter and Facebook, they're really treading on very, very troubled territory, and they have to be careful. It's not fair to large portions of the population.
And so I think a lot of the political theater surrounding this, I think, is eventually to call for things like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and all these other things to become public utilities. I'm not sure necessarily how it's going to play out, but I really do believe that over the coming months to years, because because Facebook is DARPA's lifelog, because these are, programs started up by the intelligence community, because they're part of ARPANET, all these other organizations where they're trying to get this information, they need your metadata. I think eventually it will become a public utility, but I'm not necessarily sure how. And this also ties into, again, what we see taking place with the social credit score, how we see them trying to erect this, again, this technocracy, this scientific dictatorship. At the very start of Trump's presidency, I talked about how he was going to become he was trumping in the technocracy, simply because he's playing this coy, dopey kind of person. That's all for show. You see, this is why this whole thing is going on. So it raises awareness, it gets people involved, they can gauge the response of society. That's the thing, to get as many people involved. But believe it or not, a lot of people 13, 14, 16 and younger, teenagers, they're not getting involved in social media because they're seeing what it's doing to society. So we have a lot of crazy things happening, a lot of good things happening, a lot of wild things happening. But speaking of wild things happening, apparently China is trying to target rumors, religion, in their updated party rules. Now, why are we talking about this? Because just the other week we talked about how the Chinese police raided a Christian worship service. So they literally updated the rules after, they raided these people. You got Chinese, you got the communist Chinese who, in some degree, I'm sure are listening right now. You have the communist Chinese who are out there crushing churches, destroying graves, raiding worship services, doing all this stuff, basically tearing down any kind of religious iconography, any pictures of Jesus, any kind of books. They're burning them. They're saying, look, you better not talk about anything that you believe in. You better only believe in the state. You hear me? You better not believe in anything else other than the Communist Party. This is the ultimate definition of authoritarianism. As I keep trying to harp on in so many different ways, your spirituality has got to be the highest form of political revolution. If they're trying to condemn you for simply believing in things, that's crazy. But let me get into this article. I put this up August 27th. It's from the Drudge Report feed. It says China's ruling Communist Party has issued a revised set of regulations governing members' behavior, threatening punishment for spreading political rumors and recommending those who cling to religious beliefs are being asked to leave the party. President Xi Jinping's ongoing crackdown against deep-rooted corruption begun 6 years ago when he took office, and he's shaking up the party, with Xi warning, like other leaders before him, that the party's very survival is at stake. Xi has accrued more power than any of his other immediate predecessors and has intensified efforts to ensure cadres are loyal, disciplined, upright, and honest. The updated discipline rules, released late on Sunday by the graft watchdog, the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, but in effect August 18th, put into written form many orders that are in practice already in effect. Wow, I don't know who wrote this, but this is choppy. But they're saying what I already said. This was put into practice August 18th, but they're going ahead and already raiding people, destroying churches, ripping up graveways, and doing all kinds of other graveyards and other things like this. It's crazy because what they're trying to say is that the Communist Party supersedes everything that you believe in. And I'm going to be talking about this too in one of my upcoming mini casts, where we talk about how religion is being replaced with movements, how again China cracking down on religion is part of this whole wave that they're setting, to where technology, the state, and even the military to some degree all supersede your own faith. But let me get back into this article. It says, in the most serious cases where a law has been broken, party members can be prosecuted, but in many cases the most severe punishment that can be meted out is expulsion from the party. Xi's name has also been written into the revised rules, as it is already in the party and country's constitution, putting him at the very center of party life. Party members are not allowed to speak out against central party policies or decisions, and nor can they spread, quote, political rumors or damage the party's unity, the new rules say. Party members and officials must correctly exercise the power granted them by the people, be clean and upright, and oppose any abuse of power or behavior that seeks personal benefit, one new clause says. Another new clause takes aim at party members who are also religious. While the country's constitution guarantees freedom of religion, the party is officially atheist, and party members are supposed to be too. So think about that. Well, you have them literally creating a social credit system for people who are not in the party, average, regular day citizens. They're literally saying, look, if you're in the party, you can't have your religion. The Communist Party is, the Chinese Communist Party is atheist, okay? That is our declared religion. You don't believe in anything. And for everybody else that does believe in it, we're going to watch you. You see. The state becoming God. And while we contend with this now, this again ties into generational warfare. You know, you might have an issue with it, but children are being brought up and grown, taught and to be this subservient, to not think for themselves. You see, I think people really should pull back and understand like what this means. Let me see if I can get up this clip for you guys of where we have robots teaching children, where they're programming kindergartners, Chinese kindergarten children, giggling at a robot, teaching them things. I mean, the teacher's still there, you know, she still has a purpose, you know, usher the kids in, get them all excited. Look at her, she's super giddy. Let's play this clip. China has a robot for everything. They serve customers in restaurants, deliver groceries in neighborhoods, and now they're going to teach your children. This autonomous robot, Kiko, tells stories and throws logic problems to children. The idea is to encourage interactive, proactive learning.
现在的知识传授不仅仅只是说老师教小朋友学，也希望他们可以主动的通过这个世界里面的不同窗口去探索世界里面的各种知识呀，各种有趣的事情。那我们 Kiko 可以作为其中的一个很好的窗口。
But it doesn't mean robots will replace humans. Yeah, doubtful. But basically what we're talking about there is literally the idea of education changing. What we think of is education changing. What we're being taught, how people are learning, things are changing. And it sounds wild, but who is programming the robots? Is it the Chinese Communist Party? As I said, you know, generationally, you don't have to worry about this because you know, you think this doesn't affect you, right? It's going to affect your children. This is why employees at Facebook are fighting back, because they're like, look, people need to have views. People need to be able to speak their mind. And if we start censoring people, if we start challenging or silencing voices, squashing dissent, promoting escapism, promoting collectivism, don't think for yourself, mob rule, the idea of being an independent, free-thinking person becomes it becomes a joke. You see, you have the Chinese Communist Party literally saying, look, you're atheist. Worry about what's here in the flesh. Endorsing the mind, embrace the flesh, forego the spirit, ignore the soul. There's no religion in the technocracy that these people are trying to create. That's why you've got to break it down, the different levels and the things that are going on. In these mini-casts that I'm working on, you know, I asked, again, the question, what are we going to replace society with if no one cares about religion, if no one cares about spirituality? Is it the state? If the Catholic Church is indeed imploding, and China is saying that you are now, if you're with the party, you're now atheist, you're not allowed to have a religion, they're over here raiding worship services. What happens whenever anything that you believe becomes controversial? This is why the joke of think before it's illegal is now a reality. You see, I don't think people truly understand the time frames that we're in. You know, doing this, sometimes it feels like 1980s wrestling because some of it does and does not have an effect. You have to see where these agendas are taking place. And every single week, we're here trying to figure it out. We're trying to see how they're shifting the mind, how they're shifting this, turning the wheel. You see. However, that's all I really have for you guys. This is Unraveling Society, Genetic Tampering, and Collapsing Constructs. You know, putting these things together, trying to make sure that you guys get the right amount of content delivered in the appropriate way. It is always a hassle, but it is always an honor trying to do so. You know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, it was talked about in the Bible. It was prophecy. This is why we talk about things such as 1984, the idea of them creating a constant history where they're always able to rewrite things and change what we consider as normal. You have to understand that this censorship, just as political correctness is a war on the First Amendment, on the free speech, the censorship is a war on consciousness. We're going through a period of demoralization and we have to wake up. I want everybody to believe in whatever is required of them, but we have to understand that these people are trying to silence the individual when we have to understand that this is how we move forward, is by respecting the individual. However, like I said, that's all I really have for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll have it in the description bar below. And like I said, make sure you're checking out the links and everything else that we have to offer. Check out the vault, think about becoming an exclusive member, and be sure to download this week's show episodes. And remember, guys and gals, stay vigilant, expose lies, and share truth. This is Noise Era.